you all having me. I'm Alex Johnson. I'm running for chairman of the state GOP. I've been involved in the Republican Party I've always been a Republican. Since 2004 is when I started the college Republicans at Oglethorpe University. In 2009, I got involved in my local county party. 2010, I ran for state senate. Then 2013 and 15, I ran for chairman of the state party in the past, getting 40% and 45% of the vote. I'm currently president of the Georgia Republican Assembly, which is a statewide grassroots organization that unlike the GOP, can endorse in contested primaries, but the goal has been to get more people involved in politics in the state and to stand for Republican principles. Right now we have over 160 members statewide and 4 local chapters, and we're trying to grow more. But the reason why I'm here today is to talk about the state GOP and why I'm running and some of the current issues there. The state GOP needs to become a one-stop shop for political involvement. If you look at what's been going on in the recent past, you see a lot of focus going to candidates, going to PACs, a lot of the money going away from the party. You see membership problems in some county parties and lack of involvement. And we need to be asking ourselves why. I mean, Georgia is a Republican state, but we did lose Cobb and Gwinnett counties to Hillary Clinton. And if you look at the demographics, it's not looking good statewide. I mean, some areas, like Paulding County, I know, very Republican. But if we keep losing the metro area and some of these Democratic areas, we're going to lose the state. And that's bad for all of us, because if we start getting Democratic governors and senators, that's bad for us. If we lose electoral college votes, that's going to be really bad for us. So we need to become a one-stop shop for political involvement. We need to ask how to make that happen and what to focus on. We need to be focused on 3 things, and that's the credibility of our brand, party membership and support of county parties, and fundraising. And it needs to be, honestly, in that order. Because first of all, with the credibility of our brand, we need to be thinking about why people aren't necessarily involved in the Republican Party in the past, or why people may be unhappy with the political system as it is right now. Personally, during the last presidential election, I know that in early 2016, I was already president of the Georgia Republican Assembly. I couldn't endorse in the primary, but I was perfectly happy in bringing people into the party. The Cobb County for Trump group, which was all volunteers, their leader invited me out to speak to them about how to be involved in the process, because they wanted to be delegates to national support Donald Trump or be involved in the party and learn about it. I show up out there, nobody in there except maybe 2 people out of 70 or 80 had ever been involved in the party before. And they weren't happy with it. They thought that a lot of times politicians weren't doing what they said they were going to do, and they hadn't even heard about the GOP existing. If they didn't know the GOP existed or what we're doing, that's why they weren't involved. But that was 70 plus people that could have been donors. Some of them were business people. There are people who could have been volunteering with Republican candidates, but they weren't tied in. They didn't know how to be tied in. And they didn't really necessarily want to be associated Republican because they felt as if Republicans weren't doing the right thing. All of us, we're all activists in here. We know what's going on in politics. We're the leaders. But just because we're the leaders and we know what's going on, we need to share that with the rest of the state to bring people in. I mean, 2 million people in Georgia voted for Donald Trump. Less than 1% are involved in the Republican Party when you look at it. I mean, we have, 2,000 to 3,000 people at the state convention. Donald Trump got 5,000 people out with a week's notice at the World Congress Center. I mean, if he can get that many people, and we as an organization are getting less coming out, we need to be thinking about how to build credibility with people. And that's where the state party comes in. We need to be out there letting people know what we stand for. When you start looking around at what we do, like we have resolutions we passed last year at the state convention that were opposed to various things. It said that for 5 years it would be published in a prominent place on the state GOP website. For 5 years, they would be published on the state GOP website in a prominent place. What the party stood for, what the GOP delegates say the party stands for. As of a month ago, and I didn't check today, but they aren't published. They still aren't there. And yet that's the Republican Party making statements, yet we aren't even publishing them. We aren't even letting our own delegates' voices be heard in the way they ask to be heard around the state. And that's going to make people not want to be involved. So we need to have a party that actually says what we stand for and says how it helps people's lives. I mean, you look at things that the elected officials have done, and some of you may not have liked this specific example, but it's something that may have helped. Criminal justice reform is something Governor Deal did. He did it on an angle saying that it was fiscally conservative, keeping people out of jail. Now, you may not like it, you may like it, but in the end, that policy, for example, is fiscally conservative. It could have been put out there as being fiscally conservative and helping lives, like helping communities where we're fighting for those Democratic votes. But we weren't doing that. The state party wasn't publicizing it there. My Democratic friends on Facebook were taking credit for it. And that's a problem if when we do things that could bring in new voters, the other side's taking credit for it and we don't have a megaphone advertising it. So that's one area, is credibility. We need to be building that credibility by letting the whole public know from a state level what our platform is, what we stand for, and how it helps lives. And that's the critical part one. Part two is focusing on county parties, focusing on growth in numbers. Again, 2 million Trump voters in the state of Georgia, less than 1% involved in the party. That's an issue. You look at the fact that sometimes it's hard to get involved, and this is something that I think has gone on for decades from what I've heard. This isn't just from recent history, but my personal story, 2012. I had been involved in my county Republican Party for 3 years at that time. I was legal counsel of the party. I was on the board of that party. 2012, a whole bunch of new people showed up at our county convention that hadn't been really seen before, and those were Ron Paul supporters. In 2012, a whole bunch of them showed up. Unlike in some counties, they were actually very friendly and respectful in DeKalb. I mean, they thought I was establishment and wanted to vote me out when I was sub-chairing something, but I was like, look, I'll run it fairly. And I asked my county chair afterwards, do you want them to be brought into the party? Because for 3 years, we had been talking about growing the party and getting more people involved. And these were all young people. They outnumbered us. There was a huge number of them. And he said, yes, invite them. So being a young guy, I was like, hey, everyone show up in the next county committee meeting. They show up. And our county chair calls them essentially lying, deceitful, backstabbing, terrible people to their face after he told me to invite them. That isn't the way forward for the party, is if we're excluding people that are there trying to be good Republicans. And this isn't something that's new with that group. I've heard from people with much more experience and wisdom than I have about how in the late 80s, the Pat Robertson people were excluded from the party, and there was an effort to keep them out. And then it was the Tea Party people. Then it was the Ron Paul people. And to some extent now, it's the Trump and Cruz people. To some extent, there's an effort, and it's not even a concerted one, but there are some people who don't want new blood. They don't want the new ideas involved in the party. And we need to be focused on bringing in new people. And the way to do that is to not exclude the people in the party, but to show people why it's good to be involved. I mean, everybody in this room, everybody currently involved in the party are leaders. We know what's going on. We know what the elected officials are doing. We know how to lobby the legislature. We know how to run an organization. We have the connections to speakers. So what we need to be doing on the state level is coordinating those resources, because that isn't happening right now. We need the best practices where the best strong county parties are to be shared with other parties. We need training in county parties on technology. Every county should have a Facebook page, and the state should help make it happen. Every county should have an online presence. Every county, if they want events and support from the state advertising their events, that needs to happen. Because the state GOP is the one that has historically paid staff. They have the resources to help the county parties grow, to get people involved on the local level, and to provide the training. I mean, volunteer local chairs, some of them have everything set up and it's perfect and the party's strong, but some need help. They need help with membership and advertising. They need support on electronic things for conventions, for registration and support. They need training on technology. Those are the type of things the state GOP should be providing instead of being disconnected and acting as if they're, above the county parties. The state party is not above the county party. I'm not running for chairman of the party because I think I know more than you. I'm running for state chairman so I can serve you, so I can serve the local counties and have the rest of the state committee and state executive board do the same thing. I mean, right now there's a huge information gap to the extent that you have financial information not being put out to the state committee, even though it's public record. I've had state committee members tell me to my face, like, oh yeah, they won't give me the financials to get out publicly because they're afraid it'll end up online. Newsflash, and this factors into the fundraising part, all of the information's public already. It's on fec.gov. All of the state parties' financial expenditures and donations are on the Federal Election Commission website or the State Ethics Commission website. It's there publicly. And that leads into the next thing, which is fundraising. Right now, the state party is about $250,000 more has about 250,000 more debt than they do cash on hand. Significantly underwater on the financial perspective statewide. A lot of that is from a lawsuit that came up a few years back regarding racial discrimination. The racial discrimination part was recently thrown out, but the retaliation part, which is that you can't fire someone for complaining, that part of the case is still moving forward. Regardless, there are about $200,000 plus of outstanding legal fees that are owed, and that number, I would expect, is going to go up. So we have financial problems at the state level. They need to be fixed. The solution, of course, is that if we can get more people involved, that expands the donor base. That gets more people involved. You have more of those business owners, like the ones I mentioned earlier, who are running businesses that are newly involved due to Trump or whatever other reasons. That's where we get donors. If we get thousands upon thousands of people involved, and we focus more on small donors in addition to the large donors that we currently have. And that also leads to the idea that spending. We need to look at where the money's going. If you look at the expenditures, you'll see thousands upon thousands of dollars going to communications consultants and other entities that frankly, I don't think many of us see that much of a return on. And that's part of the problem as well, is that if we keep just bringing in money to spend in the general, instead of focusing on growing that grassroots infrastructure statewide with the credibility, with helping county parties, what's the incentive to give to the state GOP? There isn't one. You have the candidates and the PACs right now. You'll hear it all the time. The money's going elsewhere. Well, the question is, why is it going elsewhere? And the reason why it's going elsewhere is we haven't been providing that comparative advantage on the state GOP level. I mean, plenty of people will say they'll raise money, and I'm sure they'll raise money and then spend it on the same insiders that aren't actually creating the impacts that we need, that infrastructure we need to keep the state red. Because ultimately, that's what it's about. We aren't going to win future elections just by having an extremely rich party and a crumbling grassroots infrastructure because the state GOP isn't supporting it. We'll win elections because we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people involved statewide that you all are leading forward, that you all are showing the way to do the campaigns, to lobby the legislators, to be involved and have their voice heard. Because that's why this past election there was so much anger at the Washington establishment, is that people's voices weren't being heard. The GOP is the method for people's voices to be heard. We are the megaphone. We are the group that everyone can be involved with and learn how to make an impact. But we need those people involved. And if we don't have that, all the money in the world isn't going to keep this state red. What will keep the state red is people like you multiplying yourselves because the state GOP is well known to everyone. I have mechanics, friends that have no idea about the state GOP existing except through me. That shouldn't be the case. Everyone should know who votes. Republicans should know how to be involved in the GOP and why it's a good thing and why it's good to give to the GOP. Yes, I'd appreciate your votes in Augusta if you're there. If you aren't going to Augusta, I'd appreciate your support and help and to talk to those that are going to Augusta. I'm the only candidate in this race that's currently running a statewide grassroots organization, has been leading that, and I've been putting out information through Advance the GOP for the past 4 years, since the first time I ran for chairman, letting people know how to be involved and why to be involved and what's going on in politics. And if you aren't getting my emails, please send me one at the address on the push card, and I'll add you to that list. And you can get 4 years of newsletters all at the bottom of the page. So with that, thank you all very much for having me. I know that was a lot of information in a short time, but if any of you have any questions,